the philosopher who changed his mind. Imagine spending years building an elaborate theory, publishing a famous book, then realizing you got everything completely wrong. That's Ludwig Wittgenstein, one of the 20th century's most fascinating philosophers. His book Philosophical Investigations dismantles his own earlier work and revolutionizes how we think about language, meaning, and philosophy itself. Wittgenstein was born in Vienna in 1889 into one of Europe's wealthiest families. Brilliant, difficult, and brutally honest, he struggled with depression throughout his life. His first book, Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, claimed to solve all philosophical problems. Language, he thought, works like a picture of reality. Words stand for objects, sentences show how objects relate. If you can't picture something logically, you're literally saying nothing. Ethics, aesthetics, the meaning of life? Meaningless. He ended the Tractatus with, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent." After publishing, Wittgenstein thought he was done with philosophy. He gave away his inheritance, taught school in rural Austria, designed a house. But something bothered him. Real language didn't work the way his theory said it should. So in the 1930s he returned to Cambridge and began philosophical investigations, completely tearing down his earlier views. The central insight is deceptively simple. Meaning is use. Words don't get meaning by pointing to objects or representing reality. They get meaning from how we use them in life, in specific contexts, in what he called language games. And once you see this, philosophy as practiced for millennia starts to look like a series of confusions created by misunderstanding language. Think about it. Philosophers debate. What is knowledge? What is truth? What is justice? They treat these as questions about essential natures, as if justice were an object to examine and define. But what if these questions are confused from the start? What if they're based on misunderstanding how words like justice actually function? Wittgenstein's method is unlike anything in traditional philosophy. He writes in short, numbered remarks that circle around problems, offering examples, asking questions, rarely giving definitive answers. Reading it is like following someone thinking aloud. This is deliberate. Philosophical problems can't be solved by theories. They must be dissolved by examining how we actually use language. Right at the beginning, Wittgenstein quotes St. Augustine describing how he learned language. Adults named objects and pointed, and he learned to associate words with things. Obvious, right? But Wittgenstein shows this picture only works for a tiny fraction of language. What about words like if, perhaps, tomorrow, hello, or 5? What objects do those name? Naming is just one use among countless others. Wittgenstein asks us to imagine a primitive language. A builder and assistant have 4 words: block, pillar, slab, beam. The builder shouts, slab, and the assistant brings a slab. These words function perfectly, but not by naming objects philosophically. They work because the builder and assistant share a practice where these words have specific uses. The word slab here is more command than name. This is how language actually works. Words are tools we use in specific contexts. The implications are enormous. If meaning is use, we understand words not by looking inside our minds or examining the world, but by looking at what people do with words in practice. We look at the language game they're part of, the context where they make sense. Meaning isn't hidden. It's right there in how we talk and act. Traditional philosophy goes wrong when it takes words out of normal contexts and asks abstract questions about essential meanings. When philosophers ask, "What is time?" they treat time as if it should have one precise definition capturing its essence. But words don't work that way. Time means different things in I don't have time, time flies, what time is it? And in Einstein's theory, time is relative. There's no single essence these uses share. When philosophers try to find that essence, they end up confused, talking nonsense while thinking they're profound. So philosophical problems aren't deep mysteries about reality. They're confusions arising when language goes on holiday, when words are removed from practical contexts and pushed into abstract territory where they stop making sense. Philosophy's job isn't solving these problems with grand theories. It's untangling confusions, showing how we've been bewitched by language, and bringing words back to ordinary uses where everything becomes clear. This is humbling, and many philosophers find it frustrating. It suggests thousands of years of debate have been largely pointless, that philosophers chase phantom problems created by linguistic confusion. But Wittgenstein saw philosophy's value as therapeutic. Philosophy should be medicine for conceptual illness. When we're tying ourselves in knots over questions that seem profound but are empty, philosophy helps us see where we went wrong and return to clarity. Part 2. Language games and family resemblances. Let's explore language games, Wittgenstein's most important concept. A language game is any regular pattern of linguistic behavior with rules or norms, explicit or implicit. Greeting someone, ordering coffee, telling jokes, making promises, arguing politics. These are all different language games. Each has its own structure, its own way of making sense. Why games? Think about chess, football, poker, hide and seek. Games have rules, our activities we do together have goals, are embedded in practices. We learn games by participating, not memorizing abstract definitions. And there's enormous variety. Some are competitive, others cooperative. Some require physical skill, others strategy. Some have precise rules, others are fluid. Yet we recognize all as games. Language works exactly this way. Language isn't one unified thing with a single essence. It's a vast collection of different activities, different games, each with its own character. When we use language, we're always playing some particular game. And meaning depends on which game we're playing. Check means something in banking, something else in chess. Love works differently in I love you, I love coffee, and the score is 30 love. This leads to Wittgenstein's famous example, the word game itself. Try defining game. Games are activities with rules and competition, but solitaire has no competition. Games have winners and losers, but a child throwing a ball against a wall is playing a game with no winning or losing. Games are for fun, but professionals play games for their livelihood. No matter your definition, you'll find counterexamples. There's no single feature all games share, no essence of gamehood. Instead, games form what Wittgenstein calls a family resemblance structure. In a family, some siblings share the same nose, others the same eyes, others the same hair. There might be no single feature every family member shares, yet we clearly see they're related. Games are like this. Board games resemble card games in some ways, card games resemble sports in other ways, sports resemble children's play in yet other ways. Threads of similarity run throughout, but no common essence. This profoundly challenges a very old philosophical assumption. Since Plato, Western philosophy often assumed that for a word to be meaningful, there must be some essential property that all things correctly described by that word share. But Wittgenstein shows this isn't true. Many ordinary concepts, including language itself, work through family resemblances rather than strict definitions. The implications are huge. If you can't define game in terms of necessary and sufficient conditions, how can we define knowledge, truth, beauty, justice, or mind? Philosophers have debated these for millennia, seeking perfect definitions. But maybe the search is misguided. Maybe these concepts are family resemblance concepts. They don't have essences waiting to be discovered. They have complex, overlapping uses we navigate skillfully in practice without needing strict definitions. Consider understanding. It seems simple, either you understand or you don't. But think about different meanings when we say someone understands. Do you understand how to get to the library? If you nod but head the wrong direction, did you really understand? Maybe understanding is shown by successful action. But what about understanding a mathematical proof? Is that explaining it back? Recognizing mistakes? Applying reasoning to new problems? These are all different. Or understanding a word in a foreign language. You might understand it by translating it, or by using it correctly in sentences, or by grasping its nuances and connotations. These are all legitimate ways in which matters depends on context, on what language game we're playing. Understanding isn't a single unified phenomenon. It's a family of related abilities and achievements we label with one word. When philosophers ask, "What is understanding?" looking for a precise definition, they're asking the wrong question. They're treating understanding as if it should have an essence when it has a complex pattern of use. This connects to Wittgenstein's opposition to mentalism, the idea that meaning and understanding are essentially mental phenomena happening in our heads. The traditional picture: when I understand tree, there's something in my mind, maybe an image or concept, giving the word its meaning. But think about this carefully. When you hear tree, what's in your mind? Maybe a vague image of a generic tree. But that image is probably specific. An oak or pine, with or without roots, summer or winter, specific number of branches. Any mental image will be far more specific or vague than the actual word tree, which applies to all trees. So the image can't be what gives the word meaning. Or maybe you hear tree, and nothing particular comes to mind. You just understand immediately without conscious mental content. This happens constantly. We understand words without corresponding mental images. So understanding can't essentially be about having the right mental contents. What matters, Wittgenstein argues, is not what's in your head but what you can do. Understanding shows itself in use. You understand tree if you can use it correctly, point to trees, distinguish them from other plants, respond appropriately when someone talks about trees. Understanding is a capacity, a know-how, not a mental state. And this capacity is public and observable. This doesn't mean mental states are irrelevant. Of course we have inner experiences, thoughts, feelings. But meaning and understanding aren't located in those private experiences. They're located in our public practices, in the language games we share. And this is crucial for Wittgenstein's arguments about private language. Part 3, the private language argument. Now we reach one of the most famous sections of philosophical investigations, the private language argument. This has generated more debate than perhaps any other part of Wittgenstein's work, and it's central to understanding his philosophy because it shows how meaning depends on public practices rather than private mental states. What is a private language? Wittgenstein imagines a language referring to things only the speaker can know about, specifically their own private sensations. Suppose I keep a diary recording a certain sensation, calling it S. I write is every time I have this sensation. No one else can know what S refers to. They can't observe my private sensation or check whether I'm using the word correctly. Only I know what S means because only I have access to the sensation. This seems not just possible but obviously actual. Don't we all have private sensations? When I feel pain, I know what that pain feels like and you can't access that feeling. So don't I have private words for my experiences? Many philosophers, including Descartes, thought our knowledge of our own mental states is the most certain foundational knowledge we have. But Wittgenstein argues that a genuinely private language is impossible. Not difficult or impractical, but incoherent. And if he's right, this has radical implications for consciousness, sensation, meaning, and mental life itself. Here's the core argument. For something to be a language, there must be a distinction between correct and incorrect use. If I say, that's a tree pointing to a dog, I've made a mistake. This correctness or incorrectness gives language its normative character, its rulishness. Following a rule means there's a right way and wrong way to proceed. Now in my supposed private language, I write S when I have a certain sensation. But how do I know I'm using S correctly? How do I know the sensation I'm having now is the same as yesterday when I introduced S? I might think I remember what S felt like, but memory can be wrong. The problem is I have no way to check. There's no independent standard of correctness beyond my own impression that I'm using the word correctly. Wittgenstein uses a striking image. One would like to say, whatever is going to seem right to me is right. And that only means that here we can't talk about right. If there's no difference between something seeming correct and actually being correct, then the notion of correctness has collapsed. And if correctness collapses, so does meaning, because meaning depends on standards for correct and incorrect use. Think of it this way. To check if I'm remembering the time correctly, I look at a clock. But if I worry that clock is wrong, I buy another clock to check it. But how do I know the second clock is right? I could buy a third clock, but this pushes the problem back. At some point, I must trust something as a standard. But with my private sensation S, I have nothing to trust except my own memory and judgment, and these are exactly what need checking. It's like checking if today's newspaper is accurate by buying another copy of the same newspaper. The second copy can't provide an independent check because it's just another instance of the same source. Public language doesn't have this problem. When I'm learning red, others can correct me. If I call a green thing red, someone tells me I'm wrong. There are public, observable facts about colors, and competent speakers agree on them. Standards for correctness are built into our shared practices. We can be wrong and corrected precisely because meaning is public. Some object that Wittgenstein is just being skeptical about memory. Yes, memory can be unreliable, but not always. Most of the time I remember correctly. So why can't I reliably remember what S refers to? But this misses the point. The issue isn't memory's reliability in practice. It's conceptual. For memory to be reliable or unreliable, there must be something independent to check against. In the public world there is. But with a purely private sensation, there's nothing to check against except more private experiences, which means no real check at all. Another angle, what does it mean to follow a rule? When I use language, I'm following rules for what words mean and how to use them. But can I follow a rule privately, in a way that's in principle inaccessible to anyone else? Wittgenstein suggests not. Following a rule is a practice, and practices are essentially social. They exist in communities who hold each other accountable to standards. A rule only one person follows that no one else can observe or evaluate isn't really a rule. It's just a pattern of behavior, and there's no distinction between following it correctly and merely thinking you're following it correctly. So if a private language is impossible, then meaning can't be grounded in private mental contents. When I use pain, its meaning doesn't come from connection to my private sensation. It comes from how the word functions in our public language. We learn pain language in public contexts. When a child hurts themselves and cries, adults respond with sympathy and teach the child to say, "I'm in pain," or "that hurts." The word gets meaning from this whole pattern of behavior, expression, and response, not from naming a private inner object. This doesn't mean pain isn't real or that we don't have inner experiences. Of course we do. The point is that language we use to talk about these experiences is public. Pain has meaning because we share criteria for its use. We can tell when someone's in pain by their behavior, expressions, circumstances. This public dimension makes language possible at all. Wittgenstein isn't denying subjective experiences. He's making a point about meaning in language. Words we use to describe our inner lives get meaning from public language games, even though what they describe are private experiences. The privacy of experience and the publicity of language aren't in conflict. They're two different aspects of our mental lives. You stub your toe and feel sharp pain. That pain is yours, subjectively experienced, real and immediate. But when you say, "Ow, that hurts," you're using words with public meanings. You learn these words in public contexts. Others understand because they've learned the same public language. The experience is private, but the expression is woven into shared practices. The private language argument challenges foundationalist epistemology, the idea that knowledge is built from incorrigible foundations in private experience. If there can't be a private language, then the Cartesian picture of the mind as a private theater where we have certain knowledge starts to look problematic. Our access to our own minds isn't fundamentally different from our access to other things. The deepest implication is about meaning itself. The private language argument shows that meaning is not a relation between words and objects, not even mental objects. Meaning is constituted by use in public practices. This confirms and deepens the insight that meaning is use. Meaning requires normativity, right and wrong, correct and incorrect. And normativity requires public standards, shared practices, communities of speakers who can correct each other. Meaning is social all the way down. Part 4. Following Rules and Forms of Life. Rule following is one of the most subtle themes in philosophical investigations. Wittgenstein's reflections on rules cut to the heart of what it means to mean something, to understand something, to act with intention and purpose. A simple example: I write 2, 4, 6, 8 and ask you to continue. You immediately write 10, 12, 14. You're following the rule, add 2. This seems straightforward. But Wittgenstein asks, how do you know how to continue? What makes your continuation correct? You might say the rule determines what comes next. Add 2 uniquely specifies that after 8 comes 10. But here's the puzzle: you've only seen 4 numbers. You haven't seen all infinitely many applications. So how does your mind grasp the rule such that you know how to apply it to all future cases? One answer: I understand the rule. I have it in my mind, maybe as a formula, and I'm applying it. But what is this understanding? Suppose at 1000 you write 1004 instead of 1002. Have you made a mistake or been following a different rule all along? Add 2 up to 1000, then add 4? You might insist you were following add 2 and just made a mistake. But what makes this interpretation correct? The point isn't that you might genuinely be confused about which rule you're following. The point is that no mental state, no formula you have in mind uniquely determines all future applications. Any finite sequence is compatible with infinitely many different rules. The sequence 2, 4, 6, 8 could continue as 10, 12, 14, or as 10, 16, 22, or any number of patterns. The numbers themselves don't tell you which rule to follow. Neither does any mental state, because mental states are finite and interpretable in multiple ways. So what does determine the correct way to follow a rule? Wittgenstein's answer is surprising. Nothing does in the sense philosophers have traditionally wanted. There's no fact about you, no mental state, no abstract entity, that makes it the case that you mean addition rather than some other operation when you say, add 2. Instead, rule following is embedded in practices, in what Wittgenstein calls forms of life. A form of life is the broader context of shared human practices, behaviors, and reactions that makes language possible. We're trained into practices. We learn to respond in certain ways in certain situations. When we all respond similarly, when we converge in our judgments, that convergence constitutes correct rule following. There's no deeper foundation, This sounds paradoxical. It sounds like Wittgenstein is saying there are no facts about meaning, that anything goes. But that's not it. The point is that meaning isn't grounded in individual mental states or abstract Platonic entities. It's grounded in shared practices and forms of life. And these practices are real, robust, public phenomena. Think about learning arithmetic in school. The teacher shows you examples. 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, 3 plus 2 is equal to 5, 4 plus 2 is equal to 6. You practice and gradually you get the hang of it. But what is getting the hang of it? It's not acquiring a mental formula. You might not even be able to articulate the rule. It's being inducted into a practice, learning to go on in the way the community does. When you calculate 68 plus 2 and get 70, you're participating in a shared form of life, the practice of arithmetic. Your answer is correct not because it matches something in your mind or in a Platonic realm, but because it's what competent practitioners do. This has profound implications. It means that at the foundation of language and thought, there's not absolute certainty or logical necessity, but shared practices, agreements in judgment, forms of life. Wittgenstein says, if language is to be a means of communication, there must be agreement not only in definitions but also in judgments. We must, by and large, agree on what counts as following a rule correctly. And we do agree not because we've all intuited the same abstract truth, but because we share a form of life, because we're trained into the same practices. This is why radically different forms of life might be mutually unintelligible. If we encountered beings who consistently made what we consider basic mathematical mistakes, not occasionally but systematically as part of their practice, we might not be able to understand them as doing mathematics at all. Their form of life would be too alien to ours. Understanding requires shared practices, shared forms of life. Wittgenstein writes, what has to be accepted, the given is, so one could say, forms of life. This is the bedrock. We can't justify our practices from some more fundamental foundation. At some point, explanation comes to an end and we just act, we just do what we do. This is simply what I do, Wittgenstein says. Not as an expression of arbitrariness, but as recognition that practices are foundational. This connects back to philosophical problems. Many philosophical puzzles arise when we demand justifications where none can be given, when we try to get beneath our practices to some metaphysical foundation. How do I know I'm following the rule correctly? How do I know what I mean by my words? How do I know other people's sensations are like mine? These questions seem to demand answers, but Wittgenstein suggests they're confused. They're trying to find foundations beneath the bedrock of practices and forms of life. Part 5. Philosophy as Therapy. We've explored Wittgenstein's key ideas: meaning as use, language games, family resemblances, the impossibility of private language, rule following, and forms of life. Now let's step back and ask, what is Wittgenstein's vision of philosophy itself? What should philosophers be doing? Traditional philosophy aims to discover truths about reality, to build theories explaining the nature of knowledge, mind, language, ethics, reality itself. Philosophers propose theses, construct arguments, defend positions. Philosophy is a theoretical enterprise seeking objective knowledge. But Wittgenstein rejects this entirely. He doesn't think philosophy should advance theses or construct theories. Instead, philosophy is therapeutic. Its job is to dissolve confusions, to untangle knots in our thinking, to bring us back from metaphysical confusion to clarity. Philosophy is medicine for conceptual illness. Wittgenstein writes, philosophy is a battle against the bewitchment of our intelligence by means of language. We're constantly tempted to misuse language, to push words beyond their proper domains, to ask questions that seem deep but are actually confused. And this creates the illusion of profound mysteries. We think we're grappling with the ultimate nature of reality when we're actually just tangled in linguistic confusions. Take the question, what is time? This seems like a perfectly legitimate philosophical question. Augustine famously said, what is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I want to explain it, I do not know. We all use the word time effortlessly in daily life, but when we try to say what time really is, we get confused. Is time a substance? A dimension? A subjective experience? Does it flow? Can it be measured absolutely or only relatively? But Wittgenstein would ask, what kind of answer would satisfy this question? If someone proposed that time is X, how would we know if they're right? The problem is that time works in many different language games. What time is it? I don't have time. Time heals all wounds. In relativity theory, time dilates. Each of these uses is perfectly clear in context. The confusion arises when we wrench time out of all these contexts and ask about its essence in the abstract. The therapeutic response isn't to answer, "What is time?" with a theory. It's to show how the question itself is confused, to remind ourselves how time actually works in language, to bring words back from their metaphysical usage to their everyday usage. When we do this, the philosophical problem doesn't get solved, it dissolves. We see that there was no genuine problem to begin with, just a confusion about how language works. Wittgenstein says philosophy leaves everything as it is. This is striking. Philosophy doesn't discover new facts or propose new explanations. It doesn't interfere with mathematics, science, or ordinary life. All it does is clarify what was already there, make explicit what we already implicitly knew. The confusions are ours, created by our own misunderstandings. Philosophy helps us see clearly again. This is why philosophical investigations doesn't present a systematic theory. A theory would just create new problems, new opportunities for confusion. Instead, Wittgenstein offers examples, comparisons, reminders. He says, "We must do away with all explanation, and description alone must take its place. Don't explain what meaning really is metaphysically. Just describe how we actually use the word meaning in various contexts. Don't theorize about the essence of language. Just look at the diverse things we do with words." This might seem anti-philosophical, even nihilistic. If philosophy is just dissolving confusions, if there are no deep truths to discover, what's the point? But Wittgenstein saw real value in this work. Philosophical confusions aren't trivial. They can trap us, make us think in distorted ways, prevent us from seeing what's right in front of us. And these confusions aren't isolated in ivory towers. They seep into how we think about minds, consciousness, meaning, knowledge, ethics, everything. Consider debates about consciousness. Philosophers ask, what is the relationship between brain states and conscious experiences? How can physical matter produce subjective awareness? This is called the hard problem of consciousness, and it's generated vast literature. But might this problem be based on confused assumptions about how mental vocabulary works? If mental concepts get their meaning from public language games rather than naming private objects, the hard problem might be misconceived from the start. This doesn't mean consciousness isn't real. It means the way we're framing questions about it may be confused. Or consider free will. Philosophers debate whether our actions are free or determined, whether free will is compatible with causal determinism. But maybe free will isn't the kind of term that admits of this sort of analysis. Maybe it works in various language games, legal, moral, psychological, in ways that don't require a unified metaphysical account. When we act without coercion, when we deliberate and choose, we call that free will. Asking whether it's really free in some deeper metaphysical sense might be asking a confused question. Wittgenstein's approach is radically deflationary. He's not promising to solve the great mysteries of existence. He's suggesting that many of these mysteries are artifacts of confused thinking. Real mysteries remain. Consciousness is genuinely puzzling, ethics is genuinely difficult, but many philosophical problems are pseudo-problems. This therapeutic vision of philosophy has been immensely influential but also controversial. Many philosophers resist it. They think philosophy should be ambitious, should tackle deep questions, should build theories. They worry that Wittgenstein's approach is too modest, that it gives up too easily, that it can't address genuinely hard questions. But Wittgenstein's defenders argue that his approach is actually more rigorous, more honest. It refuses to pretend to knowledge we don't have. It refuses to build elaborate theories on confused foundations. It insists on clarity, on understanding how language actually works before constructing grand metaphysical systems. And it recognizes that many philosophical debates persist not because they're deep but because the participants don't realize they're talking past each other, using words in different ways without recognizing it. The lasting impact of philosophical investigations is profound. It transformed philosophy of language, influencing ordinary language philosophy, speech act theory, and pragmatics. It impacted philosophy of mind, challenging Cartesian and behaviorist views. It influenced epistemology, undermining foundationalism. It shaped philosophy of mathematics and logic. And beyond philosophy, it influenced linguistics, psychology, anthropology, and cognitive science. But perhaps most importantly, it changed how many philosophers think about their own practice. It encouraged attention to ordinary language, to actual usage rather than idealized theories. It promoted philosophical modesty, recognition that we might not be able to answer every question we can formulate. It emphasized that clarity and conceptual hygiene matter more than constructing impressive systems. Wittgenstein ends philosophical investigations with these words: "A philosopher says, I know my way about. This is the goal. Not to have all the answers, not to construct the perfect theory, but to know your way about, to understand how language works, to avoid confusion, to see clearly. It's a modest goal, but for Wittgenstein, it's the only honest goal philosophy can have. We began with a philosopher who changed his mind, who tore down his own earlier work and built something radically new. What Wittgenstein discovered is that meaning emerges from use, that language is a vast collection of diverse games, that rules are grounded in shared practices and forms of life, that philosophical problems often arise from linguistic confusion, and that philosophy's proper role is therapeutic, dissolving confusions and bringing clarity. These ideas challenge much of how philosophy has been practiced for millennia. They're uncomfortable, even threatening, to traditional philosophical ambitions. But they're also liberating. They free us from the burden of impossible questions, from the pretense of impossible knowledge. They invite us to look closely at our actual linguistic practices, at the rich complexity of how we actually communicate and think. They remind us that philosophy's value lies not in constructing theories but in achieving clarity, not in solving mysteries but in dissolving confusions. And in a world full of genuine mysteries and real problems, perhaps this is philosophy's most important contribution, helping us distinguish real questions from confused ones, genuine insight from conceptual tangles, clarity from the bewitchment of our intelligence by means of language.